Is expensive film worth the money, or is it just a matter of corporations playing tricks on you? We all know the number one name in the industry, which is Kodak. And Kodak has prices that are visibly higher than others. So is it worth spending the money for something like, T-Max 400 or T-Max 100, or is it just easier to stay with something like Foma? So I use film professionally, and that is a completely different situation than if you are a hobbyist. I'm not saying it's more important or anything, but of course I have considerations because I use film possibly at a higher scale than others, and the cost of film, of course, impacts the cost of my services. So I'm particular, it's not that when you are using film as a hobby, you have higher constraints than when you're using it professionally. The two things, in my opinion, tend to counterbalance each other. But there are other considerations in the professional field, which are, time that is necessary to handle the film, and the overall reliability. So, of course, since I work with clients who paid me money for what I do, I want to make sure that their photos are saved on a system, on a product, on a device, on a medium. That's where I'm trying to get the right word here, that is, of high quality. But I love the way Foma 100 works, for example. I like the tonality, I like the grain, I like the classic look. It is called Fomapan 100 Classic. It is, in fact, looking very much like, I don't know, it reminds me of the film of the 1940s. So I love that. And, well, nowadays, this is, we are in October of 2024, a roll of, this is the Arista 100 variant. Arista or Arista, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but the Arista 100 is the same of Fomapan 100, and I can buy this for $5 per roll. That means that when I load it on a Mamiya RB67, which will give me 10 frames, I'm basically paying 50 cents per frame. If I use T-Max, then I'm paying a little more than 80 cents per frame. And that is without the development. Well, so is it worth it? Well, I did try to go with Fomapan. I love the film, and I can buy it locally, which is a big plus. I like to support local business, of course. So, but after really going through a couple of sessions where I only use that film, even though I like it, the deal breaker is the base that is used. The film is so incredibly curly. And so there are a couple of points where that issue comes to the foreground. One is when I cut it. Whenever you cut it, you have to be careful to hold it right, otherwise it starts recoiling on itself very quickly with the risk of scratching frames. But the most vexing point where that is a problem is when I scan it. I do everything myself. After the client has left the studio, I develop the negative many times just half hour after that happens. So in an hour later, I might have my negative hanging to dry. Then I wait for that to dry, then I cut it and I scan it. Many times I have the photos already in my computer the same day the client visits the studio. Well, look at what I need to do. Let me see, here it is. Look what I need to do with Foma. It's so curly that I have to roll it counter grain, let's call it this way, haha, to compensate for that curl. It makes it so incredibly frustrating and hard to scan, to put on a flatbed scanner. That curl is like 100. Oh, let me see if I can just show you. I'm going to take it out of here. Actually, I have another another one here that I just did. So let me just take one segment. This is a segment of two. So look at this. And this is where it's been already uncurled a little bit. When it comes out of development, it's basically 360 degrees, like this. This is extremely hard to push flat. Whenever you push it flat on the holder, it comes back. I've used a piece of glass to hold it down. Still, it's a battle. And at the end of the day, basically, I'm wasting a lot of time to fight against that issue. The other one is that when I use T-Max, for example, and Ilford is very similar. So Ilford, Kodak, excellent brands. But I haven't used Ilford in a while. But when I use this, this is such a pleasure to use, because the base that they used for their film at Kodak has been formulated specifically to lay flat, absolutely flat. And it is an interesting situation that happens when you develop it, because the base, the film itself, is in some way water-based. It is affected by the water. And so when you hang it to dry, it's perfectly straight. And then after a few minutes, it starts getting bendy in a really weird way. The first time I saw it, it was, what's happening here? And then when it dries, so the effect of the bend is that different parts of the film are drying at different stages. But eventually, it gets perfectly straight. Other film bases that I used in the past, if you put them against a damp cloth, they start bending away from it. So they are affected by the water. That system sometimes can be used to straighten the film. Well, with Foma, this is totally unaffected by humidity, which might be a good thing, but you cannot use water to straighten it. And so this is the effect of the film being rolled against the spool, and the part that is closest to the spool is super, super curly. And the only way you can change it is by keeping it like this for 2 days. And that, I'm sorry, is a deal breaker. It might not be for you, and that would be great. But using film professionally, yes, there is a reason why we prefer to use Kodak, and that is, or Ilford. Anything that is, manufactured to higher standards. Because it's obvious that the chemists, those absolute geniuses at Kodak and Ilford, those chemists have looked at the entire pipeline of a photographer And they said, look, let's do something to create a base that actually works for modern systems where we can scan the negative in a way that is not problematic. The other issue when you're fighting against a curly negative is that it's very likely, it's very possible to scratch it or even drop it. So is it worth the money? Yes, absolutely it is. That is my conclusion. When you load a Kodak film, or when you load a Ilford film roll into your reel, you actually feel the base being thicker. Not that it is an issue here, but this is obviously, it is visibly and tactically thinner. And that might be one of the reasons why this curls so much and this stays straight. So yes, putting a thicker piece of plastic, it's more expensive, and that's what we pay for as well. The formulation, the thickness, the fact that they actually designed that base to stay flat, among other things. Of course, this is without talking about the emulsion, among other things. That is one of the reasons why film can cost more. So I hope this was useful. I'm Paolo with Paolo Portraits here in Charleston, South Carolina. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know your conclusions, your ideas, your opinions. Post your comments. I'd like to engage with you in this conversation. And remember, shoot more film. Ciao.